President Erdogan holds a positive meeting with his US counterpart Joe Biden at the G20 summit in Rome. But are they closer to resolving several long-running disputes? We'll break it all down here on Straight Talk. Hello and welcome to Straight Talk. I'm Ayşe Süberkaş. Late last month, Turkey and several of its NATO allies averted a potential diplomatic crisis involving 10 ambassadors. That set the stage for a meeting between President Recep Tayyip Erdogan and his US counterpart Joe Biden at the G20 summit in Rome. During their talks, the two leaders tried to address several disputes. Most importantly, what to do about Turkey's removal from the F-35 fighter program and the investments it made. One solution that has been floated for Turkey to recoup its $1.4 billion is buying dozens of F-16 fighter jets along with modernization kits. On that possible deal, President Erdogan said that Biden had shown a positive attitude. Turkey's purchase of Russia's S-400 system in 2019 led to US sanctions and its removal from the F-35 program. But despite those long-running differences, Erdogan and Biden stressed the importance of their NATO alliance. And that was further shown after President Erdogan met with other leaders he's had tense relations with, including French President Emmanuel Macron. And to further discuss what came out of the G20 meetings, I'm joined by Tarik Oguzlu. He is an academic advisor at the Foreign Policy Institute. From London, Elisabeth Braw. She's a senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute. And from Washington, D.C., Rich Outzen. He is a former US diplomat. A warm welcome to you all, Tarik. Let me begin with you. What's your take on the Erdogan-Biden summit? Was it really a constructive one?
Okay, thank you for having me. Actually, it is quite important that two important members of the NATO allies talk to each other. Actually, these talks have been taking place quite often in recent years because there are so many issues to talk about. But I think it is not that much important that we have left behind this high-level meeting because problems in the context of bilateral relations seems to be quite structural and not that much easy to solve in one meeting. Because I am of the view that crises are likely to arise no matter how often the leaders meet and try to calm down the crisis environment, particularly by giving smiling pictures, because strategic perspectives, geopolitical imaginations, political values, and national sensitivities of the parties are quite difficult to reconcile. And it has become quite visible in recent years, because the United States, from my own perspective, I think, is looking at Turkey somehow in the context of its geopolitical competition with Russia and China. We all know that it doesn't want to lose Turkey to Russia and China, but we also know that the Americans are trying to get this particular interest by somehow punishing Turkey. And this increasing amount of American pressure on Turkey seems to be driving Turkey much closer to Russia. I am also of the view that there is a kind of ideological and great power competition on the part of the United States towards China and Russia, and this seems to be somehow decreasing Turkey's maneuvering capability. Turkey is finding it quite difficult to strike the right balance between its commitment to Western partners on the one hand and its improving relations with non-Western powers such as China and Russia on the other hand.
But if we would continue with the Biden-Erdogan meeting, Elisabeth, what's your take on that? Are relations taking a more positive turn, or there are very important structural problems between the two countries? What's your take on that?
Well, there are clearly structural problems, and I don't think, I agree with my previous with the speaker who just made this point that one meeting is not going to solve these structural problems. But we mustn't forget how important it is for leaders to discuss crucial, critical issues in person, even when they can't solve those issues in one meeting, because without meetings you have an incredible risk of misunderstandings and accidental turns of events that can turn into quite dangerous situations. And we should also remember that the US has a new administration, and the previous administration was very volatile. Specifically, the president was very volatile, which led to complete unpredictability in international relations where the Americans were concerned. And so at least having a meeting and having it end on a somewhat constructive note, I think in the scheme of things is a positive step.
At least that's a positive step. So, Rich, the Turkish and American presidents have expressed their joint commitment to further strengthening relations and agreed to set up a joint mechanism. How is that going to play out? I mean, Turkey and the US have been partners for decades, and now they're deciding to, set up this joint mechanism. What is that?
Well, the search for the joint mechanism is something that recurs periodically when both sides or either side realizes that they haven't had close enough consultations. It's sort of a red herring in that we have all of the mechanisms that we need. We have, for instance, a strategic dialogue mechanism between the Department of State and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs that includes sessions for military and intelligence-related topics. We have embassies in one another's capitals, and we have also an Office of Defense Cooperation, for instance, that the U.S. has in Ankara to coordinate on defense issues. And there's always the possibility of calling for a direct phone call. So the problem is not lack of a mechanism, but the recommendation for a mechanism is something that comes up to sort of blame it on a procedural rather than a substantive issue. The substantive issue is that both sides have political risk in compromising right now. And it's because the Congress and others in the United States are very skeptical or sort of negatively oriented towards Turkey and the AKP. And I think it's not much better in Turkey with regards to the U.S. government and trust after sort of the YPG issues and the Gulen issues. So there's political risk on either side reaching out and saying, let's compromise on something. That's the real problem. It's not lack of a mechanism.
So, Tarik, apart from their stark differences, what could the two countries work to enhance the scope of their relationship? I mean, for example, could strengthening NATO be an option, or could a closer cooperation on the South Caucasus add to that purpose?
I think it might be quite possible if the parties somehow change their perspective vis-a-vis each other. I think the United States and European Union members still look at Turkey from the perspective of the Cold War, thinking that Turkey, as a member of NATO, should do its best to make sure that the Western partners achieve their interests in Turkey's neighborhood. So somehow they are of the view that the key decisions concerning Turkey's particularly important geographical location are being taken in Brussels and Washington. And so the decisions are delegated to Turkey, and expectation is that Turkey somehow gets along with such kind of decision. So the Americans, from my own perspective, doesn't take into consideration that the world politics has fundamentally changed in recent years. We are no longer living in a kind of unipolar or bipolar era. It's a kind of multipolar environment. So Turkey's expectation is that its maneuvering capability, its strategic autonomy should be recognized and accommodated by the Westerners. But I think this is a quite important problem facing bilateral relations, because the Americans, likewise Europeans, do not want to accommodate Turkey's core security interests in this region. This is the main cause of the tension in recent years. So,
Elisabeth, what's your take on that? If they put aside their differences, I mean, for example, could South Caucasus become a new area of cooperation between the two countries? What's at stake for the US there, for example?
Well, so this is a challenge. I think everybody's instinct, or in Europe and North America, everybody's instinct is to want to make Turkey more like us. But Turkey clearly doesn't want to become like us. It wants to be. Wants to have its distinctive role and political culture, so to speak. And so there is resentment then if we try to pressure Turkey to become like us. But on the other hand, we as fellow allies of Turkey need Turkey to play a crucial role in its region, which is really Turkey is our best bet in the region. And you mentioned the Caucasus, but we should also remember that there may be another refugee crisis. We need Turkey to play a constructive role there as well, a refugee crisis involving refugees from or migrants and refugees from Afghanistan. So we need Turkey in all of these situations, and so the challenge for Europe and North America is to put aside those instincts to want to reform Turkey, as it were, and to work with it on that pragmatic basis, because otherwise there will be even more crises that we can't get a handle on.
So, Rich, would you like to add to Elisabeth's comments?
Yes, I'd like to both associate myself with her comments and add to them. Look, the strategic autonomy of Turkey is an increasing fact in economic terms, in defense industrial terms. And frankly, for those who know the US-Turkey relationship, it's sort of been a recurring pattern that we expect more sort of followership out of Turkey than partnership.
Yes.
I sort of thought in this decade it was going to be Afghanistan again with our withdrawal, that we would have a strategic requirement for Turkey's cooperation that would be the big project. But that big project has collapsed now due to the nature of the abrupt US withdrawal and the fall of the Ghani government. So I think what you've laid out here in terms of the South Caucasus is a possibility. I think Syria is another possibility. There's Eastern Mediterranean compromise on energy. There are some great challenges and great prospects if the U.S. has the foresight to treat Turkey as a partner rather than just as a follower that could lead to a new convergence. I expect it will happen. But it may take a year or two to get there.
So, Tarik, now that Turkey and Western countries have averted an unprecedented diplomatic meltdown over the Kavala spat, have all sides managed to leave this behind, or there's still, let's say, bitter aftertaste?
I think the fundamental positions of the parties have not changed at all. It's not that much important that Turkish presidency retook its decision to excel the American ambassador or other 10 ambassadors here in Turkey, because the core problems remains there. It is still there because the Americans and Europeans are finding Turkish position on this particular question quite problematic from their own perspective, because they think that Turkey is not complying with the terms of European Court of Human Rights. Turkey is not behaving in such a way to make sure that the European laws are taken into consideration. But on the other hand, we know that Turks are also accusing their Western partners of not understanding Turkey's internal sensitivities. So how come that the parties will be able to reconcile their fundamentally divergent positions on this issue? Okay, you meet at one particular point, you give a good picture, you talk to each other, but so long as the core issues remain there, so what's the point of having such kind of bilateral meetings quite often? Because the core issues are still there. So I don't think that we should expect a honeymoon in bilateral relations in the short-term periods.
So, Elisabeth, as for the biggest cause of contention between the U.S. and Turkey, could you talk to us about the extent of damage inflicted by the purchase of S-400 defense missile systems?
Yeah, it's hugely damaging, and yes, Turkey may feel it's just a pragmatic purchase, and the investment that made the best sense. But of course, other NATO allies view it as a complete violation of trust, and Turkey siding with Russia, just as the other NATO member states are beginning to invest more or continuing to invest more in defense against Russia. So it's in any conversation about Turkey today and for the past couple of years, that has come up as a reason why Turkey cannot be trusted. And it's extremely unfortunate, because now we need each other. The two sides need each other more than ever. And I hope somebody has a solution to it, because I don't. It's an extremely unfortunate situation, and I think also dangerous, because Turkey is a vital NATO ally. It was admitted back during the Cold War, not because it was a perfect candidate, but because it was a crucial candidate or crucial country to have in the alliance.
So, Rich, what's your take on that? I mean, how could the two countries cooperate as long as Turkey retains the Russian system?
Right. Well, I think the important point to remember here is that it's not, as Elisabeth said, it's not just a pragmatic purchase. these expensive long-term systems, the S-400 or the Patriot F-35s, take a generation to create and to produce. And the partnership, economic, technological, and so forth, that is formed during co-production or when you purchase from another country is a vital strategic investment in the defense industry of that country. So by purchasing Russian, it's not just that Turkey got the Russian gear, the S-400, which does pose some technical threats to the F-35, but it was also an investment in Russian defense industry. And that's a course that needs to be corrected. And I think having the one S-400 is probably livable, survivable in this, because the Congress chose a fairly mild version of the CAATSA sanctions, or the Secretary of State and then Congress allowed a fairly mild interpretation of CAATSA. An additional regiment of S-400s, or say the Su-57s, would be sort of a divorce decree between the two countries' defense industrial complexes. And I think that would be a very bad thing. Turkey's best bet, and I understand Turkish concerns over being dependent on the U.S. for weapons, especially given the proclivity for embargoes and cutting off spare parts and things like that, is to buy European, buy NATO systems and co-produce with the British, co-produce with the Ukrainians, co-produce with other countries that are not China or Russia. And I think doing that, even with the S-400 currently in possession, will lead to a much better pathway for defense industrial relations between the U.S. and Turkey.
Yeah, I'm going to get into that, but I have one more question to you, Nick. As for the sale of F-16s and modernization kits, will Biden be able to convince the Congress, which has grown quite anti-Turkey over the last recent years, let's say?
So it's a complex system, the United States system for foreign military sales, FMS as they call it. And as you're aware, Turkey generated a letter of request together with the American planners in Ankara that work with the Turkish military. LOR goes to the State Department, Department of Defense, and they develop what's called a letter of availability. This can take months. And that's where because there's multiple different requests for subsystems in there. So during this 6 months, 9-month period, while the LOA is developed, there's a conversation between the State Department, the Department of Defense, both of whom want this sale to happen, and Congress. Now, Congress understands that their key pressure point on foreign interlocutors, Turkey in this case, is the approval of such sales. So there'll be a subtle negotiation, not between President Biden himself, but between his secretaries of state and defense and Congress, key congressional members. Now, we know there's at least one or two on the committee that has to approve this FMS sale, or at least to allow it to proceed, that have some real concerns about Turkey. So I think the art of this will be, and I think it's doable, I think it's 50-50 whether it happens or not, will be a subtle conversation between the Turkish government and their supporters on this sale in the Department of State and Department of Defense, trying to find some combination of apparent, I won't say concessions, but gestures they can make towards Congress and these specific congressional members that have concerns to communicate that we're on a path to convergence, not divergence. And if they communicate that, then I think the sale has a good chance.
So, Tarik, what's your take on that? Do you believe that U.S. President Biden will exert extra effort to convince the Congress? And how could Turkish lobby groups work to reverse the anti-Turkey sentiment in the capital?
I think it's not quite easy to change this anti-Turkish sentiment in American Congress. And I don't also think that the Biden supports the sale of this weapons to Turkey, but it is the Congress that puts an obstacle before it. I think Biden is also not that much sympathetic with this idea due to some ideological considerations, some value differences. I think Biden administration, on the way to coming to power in the late 2000s, made a quite anti-Turkish statements. Biden himself made it quite clearly that he doesn't want to get along with Erdogan's government as well. Let me also add another point. I think United States experiences similar problems with other NATO members, but the way how it tries to get rid of this problem is quite different from the way how it deals with the problem arising from the relationship with Turkey. Rather than punishing an ally, the Americans are not taking this option. They have strong disagreements with France. They have strong disagreements with some other members in the European continent, but they don't want to punish those countries. But when it comes to Turkey, they take this decision quite comfortably. And thinking of punishing Turkey in such a way to get some concessions from Turkey has become a kind of the only game in town. So I think this is what irritates Turkish decision makers.
So there are concerns that denying Turkey to its most needed air defense could push it towards Russia and China, which the Western alliance doesn't want. But President Erdogan also said that Turkey will take steps forward for the Franco-Italian missile defense system. Let's listen to what he said, and then we'll continue to talk.
I'm thinking positive things regarding Italy. And in the coming period, especially in the defense industry, and the issue of the SAMPT, the three together, France, Italy, and Turkey, we will take positive steps.
So, Elisabeth, Turkey signed a declaration of intent to jointly produce these missile systems back in 2017. So is this a likely cooperation, and could this process be revived shortly? What's your take?
Well, it sounds like it's a positive development is afoot now, and which is really quite extraordinary, considering that just a few days ago, Erdogan wanted to expel 10 European ambassadors, including the ambassador of Germany, and well, various other EU ambassadors, and so to now proceed or continue with this relationship with France and Italy is really quite extraordinary. But it again goes to show that when dealing with Turkey in particular, European countries and the US and Canada as well need to be able to have two thoughts in their heads or two opinions in their heads at the same time, because you never get the perfect solution. And so it may seem unpalatable for EU member states, NATO member states to be proceeding with this sort of cooperation with Turkey when Erdogan has just been behaving in a quite aggressive fashion towards other EU and NATO member states, but nevertheless, completely closing the door would help nobody.
Yes.
So two thoughts in one's head at the same time, and I think that's the best we can do.
So, Rich, President Erdogan and French President Macron also met at the G20 summit. What's your take on that meeting? Are relations between Turkey and France thawing?
Well, it's hard to say, and as you know, the French have had run-ins not just with Turkey and Erdogan, but also with the U.S. and President Biden over the recently announced AUKUS deal, the trilateral defense relationship, and also now with the United Kingdom over fishing rights in the Channel. So I think that the French are pragmatic practitioners of statecraft, as are the Turks. And when they have an old feud or an old bone of contention, and new ones come up, it's time to sort of tamp down on the other tensions. I think there are, as Tarik said, I think structural matters, not just in the U.S.-Turkish relationship, there's structural sort of frictions built into the Franco-Turkish relationship as well. Syria is clearly one of those, the Levant, sub-Saharan Africa, where France is essentially maintaining its sort of post-imperial influence in certain areas that Turkey is growing into and influence economically and in terms of defense ties. So there's real limits to how closely France and Turkey can converge given these different interests. Also, France is a big defense industrial producer, frankly, and a lot of the countries to whom Turkey is now selling drones and other defense gear, France would like to be selling as well. There's going to be competition, there's going to be friction, but it's not in either one's political interest at this time, neither President Erdogan nor Macron, to have this flaring up at this time. So I think that this is a tactical rapprochement, if you will, between the two. And it's always a good thing to see allies get along nicely, but it doesn't solve the fundamental structural competition. That's
so, Tarik, what would you say? Macron has reportedly offered President Erdogan to host a Libya conference in Paris, where Turkey could be a co-host. I mean, does that mean there's a window of opportunity for cooperation of these two countries, especially on Libya?
Yes, indeed. I would respond to this particular question. I wish it produces real positive outcomes in the context of French-Turkish relationships, but I am not that much optimistic because, and from the perspective of French government, Turkey in recent years has been considered to be a kind of realpolitik challenge to be dealt with, rather than as a kind of strategic partner whose security cooperation is needed. So Turkey, in many high-level European Union documents, even particularly French positions on this issue, it's being characterized or classified as a kind of potential challenge. So it has become quite visible to us. Wherever we look in the larger Middle East and North Africa region, there is a kind of competition in Eastern Mediterranean, there is a kind of competition in Syria and Libya. Again, let me repeat once again what I have already mentioned in the first minutes of our talk. Structural problems are there.
Yes.
Parties have not come closer to each other even by 1 inch. So long as they are from different universes, how such kind of a reconciliation will take place just because of the fact that we had a high-level meeting between Macron and President Erdogan.
All right, Tarik, Elisabeth, Rich, unfortunately, we're out of time. It was great talking to you. Thank you very much for joining us on Straight Talk. And that's all for this edition of Straight Talk with me, Ayşe Süberkaş. Next time, we sit down with Pakistan's Human Rights Minister to discuss the plight of women and minorities in Afghanistan. Plus, is it too early for the Syrian regime to reconnect with the rest of the world? Until then, if you've got any comments, follow us and tweet us at Straight Talk TRT. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Until next time, take care and goodbye.